Hello, hello to my True Blue crew. It is so good to see you. I'm a little bit early today, taking a slight extended lunch break from my regular day job. And we are going to work on the puzzle mystery quilt. I am part of Team Tumbleweed for cotton cuts. This is the Wild West mystery. And just to get things set up, Cotton Cuts has put all of the clues in what they are calling an evidence locker for all of us detectives. This is just a password protected space on their website. And so I just went ahead and downloaded the single page of instructions that tells me how to get started. I keep my guide tip sheet handy because it has the color swatches on it. And this is what I need to reference with the black and white diagrams of the sewing. But I love these Cotton Cuts projects because, as you can see, all the pieces are pre-cut for me. So I can just jump right in, open up this nice bag, and I've got my half square triangles ready. Those are fabric E. And then, I've got my pretty fabric C half square triangles that are going to go right together. So all I need to do is put those fabrics right sides together and sew. And then I've got a bunch of other, these are B pieces. So those are going to be, we're going to be making some flying geese today. So I can put these pretty corners on my cream larger triangles. So that's how those are going to go. I've got a big stack there. And then we've got our rectangles all cut and ready to assemble. So that is going to be a nice, easy project for this afternoon when I have just a few minutes to sew here. I am adjusting the camera. I apologize there for any motion sickness. You can see I still have my jelly chain block up from Jelly Roll Day back in September, but new month, new project. We are working on clue 3 of the Cotton Cuts mystery. Let me just count these out. To make sure I have my correct piece count and can just sew without thinking too much. That is always the nice thing, to where you don't have to do the math in your head. You've got everything laid out and ready to go. And I even loaded a bobbin before we started. I cleaned my machine. That's a good thing to do at the beginning of the month. Get all those dust bunnies out of there. And we are ready to go. I am planning, cross your fingers, hope all the planets align. I am hoping to be here every Wednesday for a WIP Wednesday live stream. And if you're not familiar with quilting acronyms, WIP stands for Works in Progress. And I was just starting to eat up the tip of my triangle in the machine, so I need to pay a little more attention when I start sewing. But works in progress. We're going to work on them on Wednesdays, and I think this lunchtime is going to be a good time frame. It's a nice break in my day, and my other goal for October has been to work a little bit at the long arm every afternoon after I finish my day job. And that way I can keep all of my projects moving along, because I have quite a few unfinished quilt tops that need to get done. And I am chain piecing, so just feeding all this fabric through the machine, 1/2 square triangle unit at a time. And the way that Cotton Cuts has the quilt divided up for these mystery projects, you're not just making blocks each month. You are making components that are going to fit together in a amazing way. I can't wait to see the end. And there are overlapping projects. I think, if I remember right, because this is the first puzzle mystery quilt that I have sewn with Cotton Cuts. So there are 10-month projects, and they overlap because they do 2 a year. I'm thinking 2, not 3. If they do 3, that would be pretty amazing. But I think it's just fall and spring. So the spring quilt is finishing up soon. That was the Tree of Life, and now we're starting Wild West. So be sure to excuse me, be sure to watch the captions for your favorite quilters and which project they're working on. And there are some people that do multiple colorways of each quilt, which is very tempting because I like so many of the different colorways that are available. And I don't have my, oh yes, I do. Thank you. Grab my blade saver. This is my favorite little gadget. You just load up your old rotary cutter blades inside that plastic case, and then you can quickly trim your chain piecing units. I've got one there that's got an extra long tail from where I added my new bobbin. And then, yes, we are. There is my half square unit in Tumbleweed colors. These are fun prints from Figo is the line of fabric. And I don't know if there is a parent fabric company that Figo designs for. I'll have to investigate that and look at it. But I love these shades of blue that we're using. So let me know in the comments what you are working on this WIP Wednesday, Works in Progress Wednesday. We're gonna keep chugging along and getting these quilts finished. Now I am adding these half square triangle units to my rectangles, but I have to make sure because they're going to go in 2 different directions. So let me get that organized. Okay, the first one we do like that, and the second one we do like that. Okay. Decide how I want to feed it through the machine so that all the seams lay nice and flat. I'm going to jump ahead to flying geese. So we have one column. And here we'll go in the other direction. The thing with these mystery quilts, especially as a block of the month, is you get done with the section that you need for this month in, about an hour or so. And then you need another project to fill the time until you get the next clue. So I never have a lack of sewing projects. I can pull some out from years past. If I ever get caught up, it'll be a miracle. Okay, and these all get pressed to the rectangle of our unit. These are going to be like the outside edges of our components. So I'm just getting them finger pressed. And that goes one way, and like I said, I can use my flying geese as my intermediate component. And every time I am finger pressing, I think I need one of those seam roller wooden tools. And I was at a conference past weekend, and talking to a gal who had done a lot of other paper craft and scrapbooking type things. And she was saying the brayers that you use for ink would be a great tool to use as a seam roller. So now I have to go back to my scrapbooking supplies and see if I still own a brayer that I can repurpose. So let me count out my fabrics here so that I can move on to the next step. Those should be ready to go on the other side. This would be a good time to be listening to an audiobook or a podcast. But since you're here with me, I'll just talk to you instead. Let me know what you're reading or listening to these days. The last audiobook that I listened to was, well, there's two. One was a nonfiction professional development book called Never Split the Difference. And it was really interesting perspective from a hostage negotiator on how, but it was really interesting in terms of listening and questioning to obviously to get information and to progress. But that was a interesting book to listen to. But the last fiction book that I listened to while I was sitting here sewing was Ellen Hildebrand, 28 Summers. Loved, I think, or Lauren. There's a couple authors with similar names and I can't keep them straight, but it was 28 Summers. And I've got a sequel on hold through the digital library, but it's many months away before I can get that book. So I got to meet Amanda from A Crafty Fox, and she has been doing a lot of quilting inspired by the books that she's reading. So that's been on my mind lately, but I don't necessarily need to commemorate my reading with my quilting hobby. I can keep those as separate endeavors. Although I do like the book quilts. A lot of stuff coming up. I have another live stream. I'll be live on Saturday this week as well. Our first Saturday sew and chat. And I've got another October quilt along to start on. Can't wait to share that with you. But this Cotton Cuts project is so fun. They do all the hard work with cutting the pieces. So you can focus on the fun part, which is the stitching. And I'm working on the flying geese portion. So I've got the big goose fabric and the small sky fabric. And let me make sure, yes. I always, no matter if it's a lighter or darker fabric, I always press out towards the sky, the corners. The block just likes to lay nice and flat that way. So if you were doing your own flying geese and did not have these pre-cut triangles, you would have to trim that layer. So you always want to trim that layer before you add the second corner. And with pre-cut pieces, you don't have to worry about that. And these triangles have the tips are already pre-cut. The dog ears are trimmed off, so they line up so nicely there and are ready to feed into your machine. My machine is liking to eat those tips as I get going. Naughty, naughty machine. But since that's usually the seam allowance that gets sewn into the next block, it's not a terrible tragedy. Minor annoyance. You can kind of see that wonky bit there that got crunched up under the needle. So to avoid that, start a little bit slower. Make sure you've got a little bit of pressure on the piece or the threads beyond the needle. That's where leader ender scraps can help. If you feed one of those through, you can put, a little bit of gentle tug on that as you get ready to sew the next piece. So I'm finger pressing all of these. If you have one of those mini irons, I need to set up a space to do that next to my machine. But finger pressing works just fine. And look at the details on that fabric. They're just so dainty and sweet. I really like this forest green, would you call that? That nice deep green, not a grass green. And it's a little, I want to say, browner than like a Christmas tree green. That's not exactly it. It's not that bright, but I love it. I like to get these sections all pressed before we add our next triangle. Okay. So then when I sewed this first triangle, I started at the peak of my base triangle unit, my geese. I started at the tip and sewed down to the corner. Now I want to start at the corner and sew to the tip, just because I don't want to try and feed those extra layers through the needle at the beginning. So I will do that. And my fabric's got all jumbled up there. We'll see what my percentage is for not eating those triangle tips. We're 2 for 2. That was 3 for 3 that fed smoothly through my machine. Number 4 was smooth. That one I'm going to have to pre-position with the feed dot or the presser foot. That was 5 for 5. Here we go, number 6. Doing great. Number 7. We're on a roll here, folks. Number 7 did just fine. Number 8, again, doing well. Here's number 9. Number 10. And number 11 would be perfect with no jumbled triangle tips. And it worked. My machine liked that edge of the block better than There is the Flying Geese unit for Clue 3 of Wild West. Let me get these corners pressed. And then we are going to stack the Flying Geese and sew them in sets of 3. I can set a couple of these aside and then sew everything else in pairs. The other thing I like about sewing with these pre-cut pieces is that you don't have to measure and trim. I mean, I'm sure some people do. I trust the process and I just match my units up and keep going. And for this, I want my I want my flying geese unit on top where I can see that tip, because I'm going to aim right for where those stitching lines cross. That means that I get started on top of a seam, but we are going to be confident that my machine will not eat those. So I want my flying geese to go like this. So when I fold those right sides together, now I want to flip it over because I want to see that intersection. Just aiming right for where those lines of stitching cross and keeping things in line with my 1/4 inch foot. Together. So you can see how my stitching lined up right there. And then we are exactly on the tip there. And we are pressing the way the fabric likes to go towards the base of that flying geese unit. Press that last corner there, and we're making sets of 3. One more. And there we go. Okay, so I've got my flying geese in groups of 3, and then we come over to our columns that we sewed at the beginning, and those are going to go on either side. give these a good finger press. This is where you can decide if your, or double check if your seam allowance, your 1/4 inch guide, is in the right place. Because when I hold that up, I've got just a little bit extra of the blue fabric there. So that's telling me that my seam, my 1/4 inch seam here was a little too big. So I'm going to consciously move my fabric to the left towards the needle instead of towards the presser foot, and just ease up on that a little bit. Hello, folks in the chat. Mom and Pop Quilt Shop, good to see you. Glad it's sunny in Nova Scotia. I am enjoying the sunshine through my window while I sit in the air conditioning. In Arizona, it is still over 100 degrees in October, which is unseasonably warm. We are all a little bit tired of the heat, but I don't like to complain about it too much because I chose to live here. I could move and live somewhere else. So it doesn't do any good to complain about it either. I just realized I didn't put my spool buffer thing back in its original place after I wound a bobbin earlier. And I see Pamela here. Nice to see you. And Katie, so good to see you. Katie's up in Greenland, all these northern ladies joining us. Okay. So as I was saying before, when I notice that there's my pieces are a little bit uneven, I just split the difference there. Give it, an 1/8 or a 1/16 of an inch on one side, and it will work out just fine in the overall block. If you go from a 1/4 inch down to an 1/8 of an inch, I figure that's strong enough in a quilt, because you're generally going to add other pieces around it, quilt over it. Everything should be secure enough with an 1/8 inch seam. If you get much smaller than that, then I have to rip out and redo. But just my general rule. Sometimes you can stretch your fabric just a little bit to make up that little bit of difference. I didn't notice I had a seam that I should have been matching there. We're going to press to these outer columns. Almost done. We're going to put the column on the other side, and now that I know there's a seam to match there, I just wasn't paying much attention. to grab my chopstick to use as a stiletto and keep those seams flat as they go underneath the presser foot. I usually don't, I never feel coordinated enough when I'm working with a stiletto, but can't get better unless you practice. So we will use our tools. Okay, one more. And again, since I want those seams to match, I wasn't paying attention on one side of the block and didn't line those up. But now that I know, once you know better, do better. So I can get that going. Match up the bottom, hold that seam down with my stiletto. Pray that you don't hit the pin. Fabric got all twisted up there. Even with the stiletto, see what I mean? And even though I've got a lot of fabric here on the flying geese part of the block, I am keeping that to the top because I want to see and make sure all those seams go flat underneath the needle. So the more seams you have in the piece, that is the part that you want facing up as you sew. And if I would get better at left-handed maneuvering, I could probably make this stiletto work a little bit better. But we'll just keep repositioning and holding down things with my right hand. Last one. Okay. And I will grab my leader ender tab. Give this a quick press. Double check my diagram. And there is clue 3. We have 4 sections that are these flying geese units. And it's so much fun to think about how they will go together in the final quilt. If these will be all together, I'll put them up on my design wall. I was thinking that, a pinwheel of flying geese in a 4-patch might work, but these are rectangular units. They're not square. So it'll be interesting to see where they go in a quilt. I don't think they're all going to, be right in a row, but possibly maybe corners, the end pieces of rows. Fun, fun, fun. So that's clue 3. That will get labeled and set aside. And thanks for hanging out with Team Tumbleweed and Cotton Cuts. Have a great afternoon.